Mayor,
Mr. Wells.
if I may, the change in state law that we're implementing in this one particular section about nonconformities occurred 4 years ago, I want to say, 5 years ago. And, we don't represent anywhere close to a majority of the cities, but around here we represent 35. And I think most of the cities we work with have made this change to their code. So I think most cities now have brought the non-conforming use language into compliance with state statute.
What would be the exception? What would a city be why would a city not adopt this?
Frankly, the cities that we've seen that have not adopted the exact language out of statute have been more restrictive, have tried to say, you can see there's some exceptions here where if your home burns down and you apply for a building permit within 180 days, you're entitled to rebuild it, even though it's non-conforming. There have been some cities that have said if a non-conforming use is destroyed, it goes away no matter what. And that's been argued to be inconsistent with the statute, and those cities have ultimately caved in and said, okay, we'll go with the less restrictive approach. I'm not aware of any cities that have said, we want to allow nonconformities to expand, because of course, when you make the decision on zoning, you're deciding how the future of that land ought to be used, occupied. And so you got to make a decision about how you want properties to be used in the future, and typically that's not done in the nonconforming use language. It's done when you decide how your zoning code your zoning map ought to look.
Do you have cities that take block after block, changes from residential to commercial with no commercial, when it's all houses? Do you have cities that do that? They make residents they put them in commercial, a residential area? No, probably not.
Mayor and council member, if you're asking, am I aware of cities that have taken a whole block that is all existing residential and made it commercial? I guess none come to mind, but I'm certain that's happened.
Are you asking the opposite of that, Mr. Trost?
Well, that's what
That
we
you're
tried
taking-
to do last year.
Yeah. Well, that's because it was identified as a potential commercial corridor.
But it was
And-
all residential.
Right.
And now, if you pass this, they can't ever fix
Well,
their house.
there's, part of what happened last year is that we looked at that entire swath, probably 6 or 7 running blocks, and the blocks that, the 2 to 3 blocks on the inside of either one of those things, and said that it frankly wasn't fair because it is all residential. However, we did reserve the option, if you will, to look at it again. And at any given time, you can redo that, especially if
Sure.
it starts to become blighted, or if because the traffic patterns are greater than we expected, or whatever, and if it becomes a neighborhood that people don't want to live in or would prefer to see it go commercial. Now, frankly, I was with those people last year, and I guess I'm looking at what you're asking here as being part of the next resolution, but it's worth bringing up now, because I don't think that it has to do with the language that we're asking to pass here. It really has to do with how we're going to look at each one of those. I don't know, can you parcel it out? Can you say that this guy who's living on a block that's mostly commercial's got a residential property and he wants to leave it that way and he should be able to build a deck on it?
I think they should be asked to a public hearing.
Okay, well, that's fair. But I don't think that this is the thing that we need to talk about.
This should have been
in a public-
second, maybe.
Well, it's not, so.
They're not going to be at the public hearing for the next one either.
Well, we can change that. We can ask for a public hearing. I would honor that request if you wanted to do something like that. Is that possible, council, or
We didn't
legal?
get, well, we got to wait till we get there, but.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we have a question in front of us right now, 7.3, ordinance 09-05. I'm looking for a motion. If there's any more discussion, we can certainly allow that, but we're looking at just adopting the language here. Any other comments, or can I get a
Mr.
motion
Mayor?
out of this? Yes.
There's also the summary publication resolution that you will need to act upon as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
So move to approve ordinance 0905.
Second.
Okay, motion by Lang, second by Underfirth. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that goes 5-1. And then we have A, Resolution 09-128, authorizing the summary publication of ordinance 09-05.
So moved.
Second.
Underfirth, motion, second by O'Laughlin. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that goes 5-1. Now, we come to the fourth public hearing on our docket here tonight, 7.4, Ordinance 09-06. The City Council will accept public comment on proposed ordinance 09-06 to amend the zoning ordinance by amending the official zoning map to rezone property to maintain consistency with the comprehensive plan's future land use map. Ms. Rosenfeld?
Mr. Mayor and council members, before you is a report. I did prepare the rest of the presentation on the PowerPoint. Future land use map was approved as part of the plan in March 2008. Property owners affected were notified during the comp plan process and recently for the public hearings. So everyone who is proposed to be rezoned was notified during the comp plan process, which was from 2005 to the present, as well as for the public hearings. Also, neighboring properties within 350 feet of the properties being rezoned were also notified for the public hearings for Planning Commission and Council tonight. There was some recent questions at the Planning Commission regarding possible tax impacts, and I'm just going to go ahead and read the statement that I received from our county assessor in regards to classification of property. He indicates that the classification of property which affects the tax rate is determined by the use of the property. If there is a clear use, zoning would not affect the classification. If there is no use, we look to zoning to determine what the most likely use would be. If a property has no clear use and it's zoned residential, and that zoning changes to commercial, the classification would likely change to commercial. There was also questions regarding the valuation of the property with changes. He indicates that the valuation is determined based on the highest and best use. For instance, if a property is 100% tilled farmland, it would be classified agricultural. If that same parcel is zoned commercial, it may be determined that the highest and best use would be to develop the property commercially. In that case, the property would be valued at a vacant commercial land, which may command higher value than agricultural land. There was also a question regarding green acre status. He indicated that zoning is not considered in determining eligibility for green acre program. Assuming the property legitimately qualified before the zoning change, it would still qualify after the change. Keep in mind that according to state statute, if a property classification is changed from residential to either commercial or industrial, this requires a 2/3 majority vote of all members of the governing body, which would be 4 of the 6 members tonight, even if a member's not present. So before you, I have the map. This map here outlines all the changes. This is the new zoning map. Outlined are all the properties that will be changed. The other map that's closer to the doorway or the table is the current zoning map. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenfeld.